If there's a fire in your house, it's 2 a.m. in the morning, and you've just gotten out of deep sleep and you've seen that your house is on fire. Remember, first person that you should be saving in this fire is not your mom, but it is your.
I hope my mom's not listening to this conversation. Be the man of the house. Wife cannot take the lead. Husbands and wife should be equal.
Make sure you treat your woman like a princess.
Don't treat her so well. Don't give her special thing. Otherwise, वो सर पे चढ़ के बैठ जाएगी.
What does a husband and wife role look like?
It's like going on a long drive. All a woman wants from a guy is to be heard that he loves her again and again, and that's what keeps her secure and comfortable.
The next myth is such a common one. I've heard my parents say this, and I've heard so many other people repeat this to me. Never go to bed angry.
बहुत बकवास है ये. कोई सुनना मत.
What is the fourth myth that we are busting in this conversation?
The myth number 4. This is a sweet one. Your wife is your best friend and you should tell her everything.
Hey, everybody. Big welcome to the Almost Macho Podcast. My name is Dhiren, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Preet Saga. Preet, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dhiren. So exciting. I'm so excited to talk about the topic that we're going to share today with everybody.
Absolutely. And today's topic actually is a really fun topic because we're breaking down relationship advice that we men swear to live by. Because I think a lot of the advice that we've gotten is basically the things we got just like we were watching our father shave. We've picked up some advice on our relationships and we tend to run our relationships with that advice. So you and I are going to be breaking down those very exact same myths so that us men can have a better marriage and a better life. Preet, before we get started with the episode, tell me why this episode means so much to you.
Because I think there is no training school for relationships, right? We go to school for 12 years, all right, to get a job. We go to college for 4 years. But for a relationship that is going to be for a lifetime, there is no learning at home. I don't think so. My parents ever taught me. They taught me about money. They taught me how to get dressed well. They taught me how to cook. All life survival thing. But relationship survival, nobody teaches you. You only learn from the boys who probably are as bad in relationship as you are. And that's why I think bursting the myth about bro advice from the relationship versus real relationship advice.
Yeah, I love that. And you're absolutely right. I remember me growing up, and I don't remember talking about relationship and how to manage relationships and what to be doing when you end up having a fight, what to do when you're not having a fight. How do you make your wife happy? How do you run the house together? So I love that we're actually talking about this. And with that, I think the flow, not I think, I know you and I have talked about taking some of the most common myths that we hear, and we're going to be breaking them down one at a time. Do you want to kick us off with the first myth that most men are used to hearing?
Well, I think one of the most interesting relationship advice has been be the man of the house. Wife cannot take the lead. Husbands and wife should be equal. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I've heard that so many times, and especially in an Indian household, the saying is, "You're the man, so be the man of the house." And I've come to realize, Preet, that as much as I've listened to that advice, I don't think that advice is actually true and correct anymore, because men and women are equal partners in a marriage, and something that you and I have talked about so much, that is leadership doesn't equal to dominance. What I'm saying by that what I mean by that is to be the man of the house means someone who is emotionally available, to be vulnerable, to be real with our partners, our spouses. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to dominate the marriage, dominate the day to day. Tell me what you think about that, Preet.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between understanding, right? That the traditional way of thinking has always been, or at least for me, it was when you're the man of the, you're the ultimate authority. I have the final say. मैंने बोल दिया means it has to be done. There shouldn't be anybody questioning me, right? That's how the traditionally my thought process was. But then I heard this. I think Saif Ali Khan, somebody he had got this advice when he got married to Kareena Kapoor was remember there are two heroes in the household, and your marriage will be successful. And that's what's helped me realize that hey, at times I will be taking 90% charge, and Hazel will take 10%. At times she will take 60% charge, I'll take 40%. So we all balance each other out. That's what the ideal understanding now is.
Yeah, I think that if you look
Although
at
I have a thing that men and women aren't equal. It's a bit of a unpopular
controversial, it's a
opinion. I think
controversial standpoint, Preet.
controversial controversial opinion. I feel they are different. The requirement and the way that women lead are different from the way a man leads. So they're not equal, they are just different.
Actually, since you brought that topic, let's double click on that topic. Why do you say men and women are not equal? Tell me more. What are you thinking about? What are you feeling?
I feel when you start saying men and women are equal, you start comparing. Let's put aside men and women, right? If you think of it as masculine and feminine, we all have the masculine side and feminine side. So when you say men and women are equal, you're almost saying that masculine and feminine are equal. All humans are equal, but understanding that if my wife has more feminine energy and I have more masculine energy, or vice versa in certain situations, that can't be equal because feminine energy is more war talks. They think in multiple sides of it. Masculine energy is more like a hunter. They just need to get through the checklist, right? So they're different. When we say equal, and this is what I teach everybody, that when you start thinking of it equal, there's no sense of responsibility of who's going to take care of what. I mean, the roles have to be defined, but you need to have that clear understanding that we are different.
Oh, I completely agree with you. Something that I learned from my coach, similar to what you were saying. The masculine energy is the most grounded energy. So in Hindu mythology, we have Shiv Shakti, not necessarily Shiv Bhagwan and Parvati Bhagwan, but Shiv Bhagwan or Shiv, the energy Shiv is all of being grounded. It's being calm. Whereas Shakti is the chaotic, the fire, this storm that the Shakti brings around Shiv. And so, in like you were saying, masculine and feminine, very similar. The masculine energy is the calm, grounded energy. The feminine energy, as you were talking about, is the more chaotic, the more stormy, the more tempest in a teacup kind of energy. So you're absolutely right. I completely agree with you. Men and women are not equal because if you say that, we're saying that masculine is equal to feminine, which is not true. So I'm on the same page as you are. I'm glad that we actually talked about this one.
And also, and also it gives you that illusion that you understand. Because if you're equal, like I understand how you think as a guy to guy, right? Because there is some sense of, I think chemically we are wired
Oh,
almost the same
100%. It's the same energy,
as a
right? It's
guy,
the
right?
masculine energy.
It's the
So
same energy. Because a lot of time Hadel would come and tell me something and I would be like, I don't get it. And she's like, how can you not get it? And I'm like, I don't know. But so understanding that we're not equal will help you explore
yeah,
much more. Otherwise, you take it for granted.
I love that. And so bringing this back to this myth number one, which is be the man of the house, be dominating, because most men think that when they dominate, they become the leader. You were talking earlier about this idea of roles. What does uh, what does a role look like? What does a husband and wife role look like? Is it where the husband goes out and gets the money and the wife cooks? Is that what you're referring to?
I mean, that was traditionally how it was. It was a very clear bifurcation or division that's given. But now, in this day and age, it's quite a mix, right? I think uh, as a male, you're always going to be not, I wouldn't say provider, but provider of security, sense of security for a woman. I feel if you break down masculine and feminine into the most simplest term, what I've learned from my years of understanding from the coach is all a woman wants from a guy is to be heard that he loves her again and again, and that's what keeps her. So that's what keeps her secure and comfortable.
Yeah.
And all the masculine energy wants is to know that he makes her happy. I know that sounds too simplistic, but If a guy or a masculine energy stops feeling that he can make the feminine energy happy, he slowly fades away from the relationship.
Yeah.
So I think the roles are more redefining our own roles in our house. Hetal's like now the CEO of the house. She makes the final decision in household matters. We make combined decisions as a family, but it's a shared responsibility on, it's almost like an organization chart now, right?
Yeah, I love that you touched upon that because that's what I was thinking about. And this is something that Shweta and I have worked quite hard to understand. You're right. One of them has to understand, both of us have to understand who the CEO is and who the COO is. Because you can't have both people being the CEO and you can't have both people being CEO. Just like in a company, the roles in terms of operations, in terms of the day to day, have to be very clear and understood by both sides. And I think that's why this idea of dominance comes in because men think that, oh, if they are the ones that are making all the decisions, then they become dominating. And as a result, they become leaders. But like we're saying in this conversation, if one decides to become the CEO and the other one decides to become the CEO, I think COO, that creates a lot of harmony. And you've actually laid a really good example in your household. Hetal, your wife, is the CEO and you're the COO. So tell me, what does that look like from a day to day basis? Because that's not something a lot of men in our culture are used to.
Well, day-to-day basis, I feel in our household, I'm more chaotic one. I have multiple things, multiple wishes, a little bit indecisive in small things that don't matter work-wise or something. And Hetal leads that charge. I have to make, say, example, planning to come to Canada or going to Dubai or big moves. I make the plan. I am like more like a founder, and she lays down the plan because she's a better planner. So she takes the responsibility of planning. We support each other. I mean, there are times where she say that, "Hey, I can't take this anymore. I want you to take the lead on it, and I will take the lead on that." So that is always there. But understanding that you both have different roles, defining them helps you not drop the ball on that.
Yeah.
Like she wants me to take care of Rishi and be the guy in his life, which is clear role that she's going to be the loving mom and I'm going to be the disciplinary father. That has been clearly defined by both of us. I don't need to play comfort for Rishi. I need to be there as a guy with him, rock. And she's just going to be there as comfortable, loving, always understanding. So that's a different division of role.
I love that.
Cooking wise, I mean, I think women cook better food than guys, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, again, another controversial topic that we don't want to step into, at least for this conversation, although there are men that cook really well. But I get what you mean. Again, traditionally, women have cooked for a longer period of time, so the skill set is better. Having said that, I know both you and I have explored cooking. I know we both do some level of cooking in our kitchens, but I do trust my wife to prepare better food than I do because my cooking isn't just that great. But I love that you said that the husbands and wives, while they may be taking the two different roles, they do make decisions together. And you've given a great example of how you and Hathel actually take decisions together. So I think bringing this particular conversation to a close, the first myth that we're breaking in this conversation is men of the house don't necessarily have to be men of the house. They don't have to be the leaders or they don't have to be the dominating one just because they've been told to do so. But if it works between the couple, they understand what role they're taking, CEO or COO, then it's a great conversation to be having. Do you want to kick us off into the
Yeah,
second myth, Preet?
yeah, sure. I'll just close the first part of it. I think one analogy I can give, it's like going on a long drive. Sometimes your partner is drive on the driver's seat and you're on the passenger seat, and sometimes you're on the passenger seat and vice versa. I think that's the simple analogy for
That's a
this.
great analogy, and that's a great way to round off this particular myth. Why don't you kick us off into the next myth, Preet?
Well, the second one is husband and wife. Like we should have the same treatment you should give them like you would treat anybody else outside. Like you don't need to treat your wife with special standards or as a princess treatment. That is one thing that I've got from the guys. Like, hey, don't treat her so well. Don't give her a special thing. Otherwise, वो सर पे चढ़ के बैठ जाएगी. That was one of the myth. Have you heard that one as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We've heard this so much so many times, right? And I guess it comes from this idea of this first one that we were talking about, that men and women are equal. And so if men and women are equal, by that logic, women shouldn't be, our wives shouldn't be treated with special care. I also think this triggers a lot of women, because when we say to them that I want to treat you like a princess, they feel like we're actually putting them a level lower. We're trying to baby, we're trying to baby them, we're trying to coddle them. But I think that's quite not reality. What the reality is, I think most men, most husbands should treat their wife like a princess. They should give them special treatment. I'd love to hear you share more, Preet.
Yeah, initially I used to I was one of the first uh, guys in the friends to have a girlfriend, and I think the whole thing was कि अरे बस देख लड़की के पीछे पागल हो गया है, or after marriage, if I give priority to Hetal in some way, the cousins and everyone would treat like अरे ये तो बीवी के पीछे पागल हो गया है, and then I would try to say that no, I need to treat her equally, I need to give my family a priority, uh, which is a myth, guys. I don't think so. You should do that. Your wife, being your wife, she is your top priority. Nobody else in the world, and I learned this the hard way. And now I completely go by the rule that just because Hazel's my wife and Rishi's my son, or actually, just because Hazel's my wife, she gets special privileges over anybody else.
Yeah. I love that. And you and I have had a conversation about this not too long ago where you sort of inculcated the same thought process in me, because me being the pragmatic and the practical guy that I am, I've actually fallen for this where I believe that Shweta and I should be treated equally. We should have the same rights, the same rules, and the same privileges. And one of the things that really pisses me off is when Shweta gets late or we are not arriving at a party on time. And you said this to me before, it's okay. She happens to be the most special woman in your life, so she gets special treatment. And I've come to see why that is such a important learning for me as a husband, because this idea that men and women, like we talked about earlier, are equal is not true. And second, if we treat them equally, I think it defies the whole purpose of being married, of having that one woman that is so special and holds such a special place in our lives. So I'm on the same page as you, my friend. You should treat your woman like a princess. But I think that there is a caveat to this conversation. Treating your woman like a princess doesn't mean that you treat her like a child. I think some men, most of us, tend to over index on this treatment. We tend to go the other way and start, doing the most littlest of chores and just overdoing it, which is not what we are recommending. Preet, I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that are.
I used to think the same way. Uh, But then, like over time, as I think as you age, you are like, hey, that's their way of showing love. Whatever, rocks their boat. Every couple is different. I know, as us, like Hazel has been quite an independent woman, but now she she wants to be taken care of in some ways, right? And she expresses that. Uh, So, for example, if she's not feeling well, there is an expectation that, hey, I should get her an ice cream or flowers, right? It's a simple thing as such. So I used to find it over the top romantic when it'd be like, "Arey, spoon feeding, like literally spoon feeding. "Arey, nahi, tum pehle kha lo," all those things, and I used to feel extremely cringe towards some of my friends who would do that. I'd be like, अरे यार ये कुछ ज़्यादा ही हो रहा है बिगाड़ रहा है standard इतना भी मत करो. But now I understand that, hey, that's their way of showing the love. So I'm all for it, man. Spoil your wife silly. She's a special person in your life.
No, I get that. I also think that there are some women who, when they get that kind of care and they get that kind of um, spoiling, I feel women tend to think that we are controlling them. And that's what I'm talking about. Let it not become a feeling of control, or let it not become a feeling of where it creates resentment. But if you were to have a conversation with your wife to say, hey, look, I'm happy to treat you like a princess. Are you happy to be treated like a princess? Would you mind if I gave you special treatment? I think that kind of healthy conversation makes for a great place to start from.
Yeah, good luck with that. I mean, normally women expect you to understand it by default, which is another conversation we need to catch up on. But I feel having that conversation would be good. Like, what is the expectation she has out of you as a minimum bar? I think this is something that I actually asked Hetal this. There was a topic about who is the best father, or how do you define as a best father or mother? Like, there is no definition of a best husband or a wife, right? How do you define being a best husband? So I think asking them what is the minimum bar would be great, because I feel the way we love them is not always the way that they want to be loved.
So true. Yeah, 100%. And getting on the same page is so important. Fantastic. So,
Yeah.
gentlemen, those of you that are listening to this podcast episode, make sure you treat your woman like a princess. So, something that reminded me, Preet, of this, something that I got reminded of in this conversation is something that I think you and I had talked about offline. Is if there is, and this is an interesting question for the folks that are listening. If there's a fire in your house, it's 2 a.m. in the morning, and you've just gotten out of deep sleep and you've seen that your house is on fire, complete fire. There's no way to escape the fire other than running out. Remember, the only person that you should be, or the first person, not the only person, the first person that you should be saving in this fire is not your mom, but it is your wife, because she is the ultimate priority for us men. Preet, your thoughts on that?
That's a bit of a hot topic to touch on. I hope my mom's not listening to this conversation. Well, I think I'm going to play it very neutral in this one. The first person you should be saving is yourself. Everyone can take care of
Oh,
themselves.
Preet. Preet, why are you so scared to press the controversial button? I think most men fight a fight their whole lives between their mothers and their wives. And they're unable to understand how to manage this relationship. So I'm not necessarily saying that there's a real fire. Please don't save your mothers. That's exactly quite the opposite of what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to make a point of using an extreme example is that understand how important your wife is. And again, going back to this idea that treating her like a princess, giving her special privileges, that means men have to understand that your wife comes over your mom in this relationship, in the matter of this relationship. She does take precedence. Do you agree with that? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think there's an unsaid not rule, but a tradition where the expectation is that always have your mom as the top priority, right? I mean, my mom has that expectation as well out of me. That if they were choosing between any decision between my wife and my mom, she expects that I will choose her. And that's the traditionally approach that I had taken. But I now understand that your wife has to be your top priority, because this is the woman as a partner who's there. It shouldn't be choosing. She's your partner, so she's by default by your side. So it's earlier it used to be me against her, or my mom against my wife, or versus my wife. But now it's like, hey, this is an issue. My wife is my default partner. How do we tackle this situation of the priority?
Yeah.
So she'll be helping me in setting the priority, and she'll be like, hey, Preet, this way. This is, better priority is to choose mom on this. We have a default rule between both of us where if there is something that if we made a big mistake which the family doesn't approve, if it's in front of my family, default I'll take the hit for it, because they can't disown me, and with Hetal's parents, she will take the hit for it.
Yeah.
But we will be united in the background.
Yeah. So smart.
So uh, anytime my mom complains about something to Hetal, she has complete rights to say that Preet told me that's why we did this. Sorry, I'll speak to Preet and I'll take the hit for it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, right? And that's a great way to avoid unnecessary conflicts, unnecessary drama. And I don't think there's any shortage of dramas in most Indian, South Asian households. I think generally in most marriages, there is enough drama between the wife and the mother-in-law. So this is a great way to manage that.
Yeah, and to round this up, I think one of the things that Hetal told me was very interesting. She had heard it in one of the podcasts. Is that traditional thinking is that uh, you have to either choose the traditions and principles of a guy's household or a girl's household, right? But I think the parents need to understand that when a couple marries, they pick and build their own tradition. They are a separate family unit, and they have the rights to choose whether they want to pick something from the wife's side and something from the guy's side as tradition and how they live their life. So definitely, wife would be a priority because you are becoming a separate unit. Your roots are still the same, or your seed would still be the same, right? But you're completely in a different environment.
Agreed, 100%.
All right, Dhirain, that's a great conversation we had. Why don't we talk about the next myth?
Yeah, the next myth is again one such a common one. I've heard my parents say this, and I've heard so many other people repeat this to me. Never go to bed angry. I think this one is so used, and it's actually dictated how I've run the first many years of my marriage. It was a crime in my house to go to bed angry, and I would fight and I would fight and I would fight till we were not angry. But before I get into that story, Preet, tell me why this is a myth, and what's the truth? What's the reality?
Well, I don't know if it's a myth, but this was definitely a cultural advice that everyone follows. Never got get to bed angry. My wife also wants to do that, but I think बहुत बकवास है ये. कोई सुनना मत भाई. सूर्य अस्त होने के बाद महाभारत का युद्ध भी बंद हो जाता है. दे से दुनिया इज एंडेड. कल की लड़ाई कल देखेंगे.
Correct.
आज का प्रॉब्लम सॉर्ट हो गया है. ये कल का प्रॉब्लम है.
I
So
love that you put the
I tell this
Mahabharata
to
into
Hetal.
this.
It is because it is kind of traditionally, this is what we follow, right? Mythology, the stories that we understand. And I mean, it upsets Hetal quite a bit, a lot of time, my wife and our relationship, that, I'm very comfortable going to sleep. I could, this may sound really bad, but I could go to sleep mid conversation, mid argument if I'm tired, which
Definitely going to
sometimes
put you on trouble
gets
now that you said it
worse.
on air.
Yeah, yeah. It gets it worse. So I feel by the evening, your decision making, your thinking capacity goes so low that it actually worsens if you try to resolve that problem. What has worked for me, it didn't start that very well, but I tell Hazel, like, listen, I need to walk away from this conversation right now. I'm in a very, very low mood, and I will say things that I don't mean. So can we continue this tomorrow?
Yeah.
And it doesn't go down well all the time, but it works right now. What about you?
Absolutely. And I
What do
learned
you
this.
think? What is your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I learned this the hard way. I was sharing the story with you. The first few years of my marriage, I was hell bent on solving everything before we went to bed because I was from this lesson that we shouldn't go to bed angry and that we should be all happy and hunky and dory. And by the time we get to bed, so the next day is a great start. But like you've rightly pointed out, even the kings and the emperors, when the day ended, the fights ended. And I think space between a husband and wife, this idea of keeping distance and not necessarily rushing to solve everything at that very minute is a great piece of advice because as humans, we all have different temperaments. We all have different ways we react to stress, and we have different ways we react to incoming signals, whether those are angry signals, happy signals, sad signals. And I think when we give each other that space, we actually do make room for appreciating and understanding where we are both coming from. So I completely agree with that advice that it is okay to go to bed angry. It's okay to ask for space. It is okay to pause a conversation, pause a fight and say, hey, look, I don't necessarily think that we're both in the best shape to make a decision right now. Maybe we can come back to it. And I think in the last few years, Shweta and I have both tried very hard to make this a reality. We will actually ask each other for space. And funnily, Shweta used to love leaving the house and going and getting some air. And I used to hate that habit of hers because it would make me feel like she's running away from the conversation. But I've learned again with experience that it's okay. If you have communicated to your husband or to your wife that you need space, you need a bit of time out, it's absolutely okay, in my opinion, to to go to bed angry because anger is a real emotion. Anger is like fire. You can't just quell fire just because it started and you've been able to quell it doesn't mean your partner can quell it instantly, right? So I think it's a bit about understanding and appreciating that.
Fantastic, fantastic. I really love that. Uh, to the listeners who are young couples and newly guys who got married right now, I think the best analogy that Hetal gave me, and it kind of resonated with me, is one of you will always be the microwave, and one of you will always be the slow stove cooking. So the processing time of heating, it's the same thing. One of you will cook and take your time to do that, but it's always good to communicate. Don't just shut down. Initially in my marriage, I used to just shut down and go to sleep, and that used to make her feel abandoned. But now I tell her that, hey, I'm not in the position to talk right now or discuss this. Can I take some time to process this and get back to you?
Yeah.
And that's how it was. So understanding the difference between pressure cooker and
Oh no,
slow cooking stuff.
that's a beautiful. It's a beautiful analogy, and more importantly, you touched upon this idea that communicate. Right, we need to be able to communicate our feelings. No matter how angry we are, we should be able to articulate our feelings and tell the other person, "Hey, I'm not leaving you. I need more time to deal with this." So I think that's beautifully said in the example that you shared. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Preet,
Okay.
great conversation on myth number 3. It's time to move on to myth number 4. I'd love for you to tell our listeners our listeners and our viewers, what is the fourth myth that we are busting in this conversation?
The myth number 4. This is a sweet one. Your wife is your best friend and you should tell her everything. There's a difference between honesty and emotional dumping. What do you think of this?
Oh, that's a good one, right, Preet? Like, I can't tell you how many times, and again, this is going to be a hot take. This is going to be a controversial piece of advice that we are sharing here. I think it's okay to not tell your wife everything. And I'm not advocating for lying. What I'm saying is be selective of what you tell your wife because, like you said, Preet, there is a difference between honesty and emotional dumping. And I've seen examples where couples just one of the partners decides to get angry and then just completely just dumps everything on the other partner, and the other partner is feeling so lost and so confused, and they're feeling the weight of everything the other partner just threw upon them. I think this is what we're talking about. Be very careful, or be mindful, not careful, be mindful of what you're sharing such that it does not become emotional dumping. I'd love to hear, Preet, what do you think about this one?
Therein, I completely disagree. You should tell your wife everything. There should be no filter, and that's how the life should be. ठीक है?
And let's come back
Please.
to this episode after come back to this podcast after 2 weeks and tell us how that went.
No, I mean I've played around with this quite a bit, telling everything unfiltered with my wife, to an extent that I think I started suffering. I used to tell her unfiltered thought, which would irritate her because my thinking process is very different on the way that she hears and listens to me. So I feel definitely you need to share, have complete transparency, but not necessarily you need to share everything with her. You have your best friends to share a lot of things, or you have your therapist. She shouldn't become your therapist. That's what I think would be one of the best ways that I can put it there. Um, and also there will be certain things probably she just doesn't want in her life.
Yeah, I think I, in my opinion, I think it's okay for your partner to be your therapist to a certain degree. What I mean by that, and I'm taking from what you were saying, that steady stream of consciousness. I'll give you an example from my marriage. Like where Shweta and I are, you know, dealing with something. Uh, Earlier on, even sometimes today, if I'm stressed, I tend to just blurt things out. Now, this is me thinking aloud and processing my own thoughts, but those thoughts may not land the way I would have landed them if I was more sane, if I was more in control of my emotions. So I think, like you said, not dumping a steady stream of consciousness is a good piece of advice, because you don't know how that advice is going that conversation is going to land, because it's not really even a conversation, right? It's just thoughts. And I've like I said, I've done this so many times that it ends up coming out completely opposite of what I had heard it in my head. And I think that sometimes will upset Shweta, because she doesn't deserve that kind of thought process coming at her. It's very unfiltered, it's very raw, and it's unfair for us husbands or even wives to dump all of that onto our husbands without having first processed it.
Yeah. Swad anusar namak. Bas, that's what you need to see. Whatever is required, you give it. More filtered. They need to understand in their terms what is required for them. Share all the gossip in the world, but not necessarily all the secrets. Or not necessarily all the entire conversation as a brain dump to them.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
I want to be very clear. Preet, you and I are not advocating to be dishonest. We're not advocating to lie. We're not advocating to hide things. What we're saying is be mindful of when you are dumping stuff and when you are actually sharing things, when you are actually wanting to have a productive conversation as opposed to just blurting out shit, thoughts, random, unfiltered, raw. That's what we're talking about. And
Yes. And please, 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 for the love of God, do not share with them what you did in Vegas or Thailand. Ever.
that is the rule number
We
one
should keep this.
when we all bros should follow. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. No, we're gonna get fired for
But
this one
there's
today.
always that one guy in the group, right, who goes and tells everything to his wife, and then you come to know, and then your wife would be like, "अरे ये तो तुमने मुझे बताया ही नहीं."
Yeah, but you see, that's a whole different code. That's bro code. That's a whole different episode on bro code. This is like bro code number one. Do not repeat what is. Not we're kidding, guys. If you feel like you need to tell your wives what happened in Vegas, that's by all means go for it. Again, just keep in mind you don't have to tell your wife everything. There are some things better in your heads, in your thoughts. And with that, Preet, I think it's time to bring this episode to a close. And as always, as in every episode, I'd love for our viewers and listeners to get some sort of hacks and tips and tricks. So, is there any books or podcasts that you recommend, Preet, that husbands should watch and listen to?
Um, I don't know if there is any books or podcasts on relationship that I have heard lately, which is there. But the book that I can recommend, one of the books that has transformed my relationship with Ethel, is Nonviolent Communication. That is going from you conversations to I conversations, and understanding that communication never happens, especially between husband and wife. You say something and they hear something. So to ask them what they understood of what you said is important. For example, if I would tell Hazel that usually, when we would get late, I had the same problem like you have, where, we would end up having a fight on our way to a great event, end up having a fight because she was late by 10 minutes, right? So I would say, you're always late. And that is always an accusation statement. What I started saying is that, hey, I feel that you don't respect my time and my sense of urgency to reach on time because of this. I'm okay that you're late and we're delayed, and I'll let the host know that it was my mistake. I will never blame it on you, but I want you to understand this. So that I statement is better, and to ask her what really she heard after the conversation or what you hear. And one of the best books is Nonviolent Communication. Very highly recommend that.
Preet, both great pieces of advice and something that Shweta and I have been trying very hard to implement. And it's not easy for people that are listening and watching. It's not easy because when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're angry, things get said, things happen. But I think if we were to start, like you said, Preet, from an I conversation, I feel it just lands the message so much better because in that very moment the other person also feels seen, safe, they feel heard because we're not accusing them. And I love that you brought that up in this conversation. I have a book recommendation that I think every man should read. It's called The Way of the Superior Man. It's a phenomenal book on understanding the masculine and feminine energy conversation that we were having earlier in this podcast conversation. So if you have a moment, check this book out. It's a phenomenal book. It's going to give you some great pieces of insight on this conversation that Preet, you and I were having about masculine and feminine. And
Dude, you had me at the title.
the way of the superior man.
Yeah.
One more thing that I would share that's really changed me as a person and also my marriage is joining a men's circle. If you have access to a men's circle, and I know it was for me, it was a very new thing a few years ago, joining a men's circle. I never understood what the conversation was all about, but since I've joined one, and the one I've been part of is is run by a guy named Mark Usher. He's out of Ireland. He runs a phenomenal men's circle. He also runs a podcast called the Be the Husband She Brags About. So if anybody's interested in that, I think this is one of the most underrated conversations that men actually it's not underrated. I think it's one of those things that most men don't even know about. And so, if you can, and if you are interested, check out what a men's circle is and see if you can join one. Guarantee you, it will change your marriage and it will change you as a man. Any other hacks before we wrap up this conversation? Any other piece of advice, Preet, before we wrap up this conversation?
I think I like your idea of men's circle. Not everyone might have access to it. I feel take relationship advice not from your best friend or a friend. I think take from people who you look up to and their relationship is what you look up to, right? And take it from both a male and a female perspective because that will be a different perspective and then form your own opinion. Firstly, try to resolve it between yourselves itself and get a specialist or have a therapist all the time. We have therapists for ourselves. We have a physical trainer. Might as well have an ongoing therapist as a couple counselor if you're in a rocky place. But get expert advice, not a random friend who's going to give you advice that might be a myth.
Brilliant. What a beautiful episode, Preet. Thank you for sharing that. And with that, let's bring this one to a close. Everybody, thank you for being with us. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you. Thank you, Doreen. Such a great one.